Righty. My clock says 10:32, so we may have a few more join as we get started here. But I just wanted to say to everyone who's on this morning, good morning, and thank you so much for joining our session today. I want to wish you all a happy Memorial Day weekend, and I hope everyone gets a chance sometime this weekend to remember and honor all of those who have sacrificed so much for our country and for all the freedoms we enjoy. So happy Memorial Day weekend. I'm going to take a second and give you a brief introduction. Joining us today, we welcome Bishop Susan Candea to our congregation session. Bishop Candea was elected to her first six-year term back in 2019. She oversees the ministries of 164 congregations in our synod, as well as the work of the rostered leaders and the parish ministry associates. Her and her staff have provided support to all of us during this pandemic and has assisted many of our congregations, including ours, in the call process. So before I turn it over, again, I will let all of you know if you've got a question for the bishop, I would like for you to enter it, type it into the chat room. The chat room, all you have to do is on your upper right-hand corner of your screen is a chat button. It's a little bubble, and you click on that. You can type in your question, and I will take those questions and then pass them on to the group. So please, any question you have, feel free to put it in the chat room at any time. I will be monitoring it and making sure your questions get asked. And then also during the session, please, again, mute yourself if you're not going to be speaking so we can eliminate some of the background noise. And if you, again, want to view just the speaker, just the person talking, you can change how your settings are for your screen by clicking up on the top center and choosing just who's talking as how you view your screen. Otherwise, you can view everybody. A little bit of your whatever your personal preference is. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Bishop Candea for a few comments, and we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. It is wonderful to be with you all virtually. When we talked about this, the plan was I would be in St. Louis and have an opportunity to worship with you on Saturday and Sunday morning, and then have time for conversation. And here we are. So I want to start out by just talking about a few things, but I'd really like to spend most of our time in conversation. So if you have a question, this is a time to go ahead and ask that. As I thought about what I wanted to briefly share with you to kind of get things going, is I want to share with you about why we are part of a larger church. We are part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which has 65 synods, and the Central States Synod is one of those. We have congregations across all of Missouri through Kansas, and you can use this in the next trivia game. How many square miles does the Central States Synod encompass? And it is 150,000 square miles. So we have a lot of territory. There's a lot of diversity, as you can imagine, from the St. Louis area to Western Kansas, Dodge City, Garden City, the Lake of the Ozarks. I mean, we just cover the whole gamut. And so the question is, why be part of something larger than our own individual congregations? You are a very vibrant congregation. You have all kinds of ministry that is happening. Why not just go it on our own? Well, as I thought about that, why we are part of a larger church, there are two things that came to my mind. And one is simply practical. There is so much more we can do when we combine our resources. The ELCA has over 9,000 congregations. Okay, just think of what you as an individual congregation can do, multiply that. And yes, for, many different sizes. We have about 3.4 million members. So when we want to make a difference, really want to make an impact, and we've seen this time and time again, addressing world hunger. I mean, we can mobilize resources in ways and make a much larger impact than we could as individual congregations. The same thing with Lutheran disaster response. Social service agencies, again, by combining our resources, the kind of things that we can do are absolutely phenomenal. We also combine our resources to do things like seminary training. Can you imagine if you as a congregation had to figure out how to do seminary education, plus, and I know you've been working with my associate Dave Wetter in your call process, but by combining our resources as a larger church, we're able to fund seminaries to do education for not only our pastors, but we also have lay school networks that we do across the church. Again, by combining our resources, providing worship resources, providing education. All of those things happen because we're part of this larger church. And so, for a very practical reason, it makes sense to pool our resources and to collaborate with one another because we have our stronger voice. People tend to listen to a denomination our size, and it's not just about size, but it's about the kind of impact that we can make. And the same thing is true on a synod level. Again, if all of our individual congregations tried to do all this, that would be a lot on all of you. But because we're in this relationship with one another, as Jennifer said, then we can support you. We can provide resources and guidance and assistance as you navigate through the call process, as you kind of figure out, well, how might we do this? Well, we're in conversation with other congregations, and we can share that. We also come together to do youth ministry and outdoor ministry and campus ministry. Again, individually, we wouldn't be able to do that, but as a synod, we can fund campus pastors who are a presence of grace in the midst of our secular universities. So all of that, again, is for me a strong argument. It's like, well, and I often hear, so what does the Synod or the ELCA do for me? And we need to reverse that question and say, what do we as the ELCA, we as the Central States Synod, what do we get to do because we have pooled together and we are sharing our wisdom, our resources, our voices, our ministries. And so we make such a greater impact by doing that. So that's a practical reason for coming together and being part of a larger church. Because I'm convinced that when we do have our resources that come together, wow, incredible things, I mean, happen, and they are happening. Even in response to COVID-19, the last I heard that this church, simply to help out other churches, has raised over $1 million in less than a month. I mean, wow. Those are things we could not do on our own. The other reason, and I actually think this is a more important reason, and maybe this won't surprise you since I've been a pastor for many years and I'm now the bishop, is a theological reason. We are not meant to do this on our own. Actually, to talk about individual Christians is kind of an oxymoron, because being a Christian always means we're part of the body of Christ. We're always part of community. And you've experienced that, right? Can you imagine doing this on your own? Oh my goodness. But you are part of a community. That's what the body of Christ, I mean, think about that. Even think about that literally. For Christ to be present, and Christ is present, it is through Christ's body. And Christ's body is the community, the church, not just individuals, but the church. Not diminishing what we do as individuals, but it's the community. And so those individuals then that make up that community, and I mean, Paul was a genius. I'll just say Paul was a genius. He may have said some things that were a little wet, but for the most part, Paul was a genius in the New Testament. And he used that image of, you can't say to the ear, I don't need you, or the mouth or the foot or whatever. What if we were all a hand? Oh my goodness. Or we were all a mouth and we never stopped to listen to one another. But individually, we are all part of this body. And then look what this body can do. I mean, so I think being part of community is actually a reflection of Christ's presence. Now, take that same concept from individual congregations and multiply that. And so the body of Christ is now experienced in all of these different communities across this country. And we can't say to the folks in Western Kansas, oh, we really don't need you because you're not like us. And we can't say to the folks on the East Coast, oh, you have such a different, you have no idea how to relate. Or the people on the, whatever it is, we all need each other. And there is the Spirit works through us and challenges us. One of the things that I have so appreciated in my ministry, and I've always been involved on the Synod level, but I interact with people that I normally wouldn't. And so I'm learning things. It's like, I never thought of it that way. You're helping me to see and understand things differently because you do come from that different perspective. And then again, you multiply that. I love being part of the larger church. Now, there's some things about it that can be challenging, and you can ask a question about that. But again, my expanse of what it means to be the church, I didn't know that people, prior to the pandemic, that we have worshiping communities that gather together in a bar. Now, here we have it in a coffee shop, but in a bar. Who would have thought? Or communities that worship in a different language, and there's such a richness there. And then you keep multiplying that, and we are part of the Lutheran World Federation, which again expands how we understand and see and experience Christ. So go to Papua New Guinea. I mean, we are companion synods with that. And we think we're teaching, we brought Christ to them. They have brought Christ to us by their ability to, they don't have the big buildings and the organs and the whatever, but these are vibrant, faithful people. Or Russia, we think that this time of exile has been hard, and it has been hard. But in Russia, they couldn't gather together in churches for years. And faith continued. What a witness they are. And we wouldn't hear that witness if we didn't understand that we were all connected and that we were part of this larger church. So for me, that's why, and again, this is not to be critical of independent congregations or different denominations ever, but I think that there's a richness by being part of a larger denomination, including a richness that comes because we don't all agree with one another. Did you know that? We're not all of one mind in the ELCA. I mean, any statement that our presiding bishop puts out, which she recently did, you're going to get comments across the board. And some people that would be, oh, we can't have that. But you know what? I think that's awesome, because that says our unity is not in that we're all like-minded people. Our unity is not even in our interpretation of the gospel. Our unity is in Christ. And so we reflect and live out the reality that we are the body of Christ in these ways by being connected to something larger, which at times challenges us, and other times is comforting, and other times we're like, what in the world is happening? Are we really understanding each other? But all of that, I think, gives room and opportunity for the Spirit to do some pretty amazing things. And I have to tell you, I have been amazed at what the Spirit is doing during this time, and continuing to connect us. So that's kind of my spiel, or my things that I wanted to just get you to think about. I mean, I can certainly get into some more specifics if you want to know some more things about either the Central States or the ELCA, but I'm going to stop there and let you all ask questions and talk about what's important for you. And I think that there are chats? Is somebody going to tell me the questions, or you want me to?
I'm going to monitor the chat room right
Okay,
now.
thank you.
There isn't anything on the chat session, so if someone does have a question, you can type it out there. Or if you're able to unmute, you're welcome to ask directly.
Absolutely.
So I got to tell you, so one of the things that I thought of while you were talking was, of course, this pandemic has been a challenge that we've all been facing. But besides that, what do you see are some of the other challenges that we are facing into, either as a synod or as ELCA total? What are you feeling or seeing as some of the other challenges?
I think that the challenges are, for the ELCA, there seems to be, and I think that this is a way that's happening in our country, and it makes me nervous, is that there seems to be more divisiveness. And I think that, again, we have differences, and can we as a church lift up those differences, respect those differences in a way that it doesn't become divisive? And our normal way of doing things, I remember preaching this sermon years ago at a Synod assembly. It's like, if I don't like how things are going, I'm going to pick up my marbles and leave. And again, I understand that we have to feel, comfortable, and that it's a reflection of how we understand faith. But I think the challenge is to continue to walk together in our differences. In a very, the culture in which we live, it seems like it's pretty easy to go down sides, just kind of make divides. The other challenges we face as a church are, we are one of the whitest mainline denominations. While we have this incredible theology of grace where all are welcome at the table, we are not racially, ethnically inclusive, reflecting the broad spectrum of our country. And again, with this incredible message of grace, that kind of breaks my heart. So how do we continue to deal with our own institutional racism and examine why is that when we have such an incredible message? So to address those kinds of differences, and also just going forward, how do we balance between, we are an institution, and institutions are important because they help give us stability, but it can't just be for the institution. So we need to be flexible and open to where the Spirit is leading us. But how do we balance between supporting the institution, but not simply for the sake of the institution, but to give us a structure so that we can explore different things? And as congregations get smaller, and you may not know this, but at least 50% of the congregations in the ELCA worship under 50 people. So we have a lot of small congregations. And that does make it hard financially to support pastors and a lot of those things. And so when we feel that financial stress, we tend to start focusing inward. And so we're giving less outward to the larger church. And at a time where, quite frankly, some institutions are questioned. And so we've certainly experienced it here in the Synod. Mission support, that's the percentage of the offerings that individual congregations have that they share with the Synod. 50% of what we receive, we share with the larger church. It's been slowly declining. And so we need to figure out how can we continue to provide resources, support, be the church in this collaborative way when we have less financial resources. So I think those are some of the things. And guess what? The world is changing. Have you?
Yeah.
I mean, even before the pandemic, right? I
Right.
mean, how many of us remember? I mean, I grew up in the church, and just the way we used to do things, even like Wednesday nights were church nights. I mean, that's been gone a long time. And so we're constantly figuring out how do we remain relevant and faithful. We have this beautiful tradition of grace and this liturgy and understanding of church at the same time. How do we communicate that in a way that's not simply tied to the past, but is always reforming? So,
Yeah, and the next question is kind of linked to that. It's with this pandemic, we have all had to pivot from doing church in our church buildings to doing church digitally.
mm-hmm,
And so, what are you seeing within the synod or even in other synods from how to do digital well and best practice sharing and making sure that content of worship is feels good for those
mm-hmm,
who are watching it and they're getting the message and wanting to continue to watch and maybe even join us physically once they
sure.
can or the pandemic's over. So just some thoughts maybe there.
Mm-hmm. I think that this time has actually forced us, good things come out of crisis, to really focus on the gospel. I mean, because that it is the good news. And how do we communicate that gospel? And I know congregations have done, phenomenal things, different music and different things. And some of our congregations have been smaller and they can't quite do it. But when pastors call me stressed about, how do I put together this? How do I put together that? I remind them that what people need is to hear the gospel. Just preach the gospel to them, whether it's Facebook Live or I actually kind of a Zoom thing where you can interact and, even Facebook Live chat, but preach the gospel and also invite people into a way that while there is so much about gathering together and hearing the gospel in the gathered community and sharing the meal. That's been, and singing and all of that. Also to remind people that gospel isn't just within this worship service. So inviting people into practices throughout the week that they can continue to nurture their own spiritual lives. For me, I live alone. And so I don't have anybody to share the worship experience with. And it's hard. I mean, I can see people on the screen, but it kind of feels like, I'm watching something rather than participating in something. And I miss participating. And so I've really had to focus on my own spiritual practices. I do a lot of walking, scripture reading, journaling, listening to music. There's some really fantastic things you can hear, And I think when we do that, we are continuing to nurture our own spiritual lives so that when we do come back for in-person worship, we're going to bring that richness into the community. And then how do we continue to nurture that community? So that's probably the biggest thing, I would say is be who you are and preach the gospel.
Okay. Yeah, that completely, it's true. The content and the gospel are what people are really going
Mm-hmm.
on to listen to.
Yep.
So we've had a couple questions come through the chat room. The very first one is, can you give us an overview of what was going to be covered at the Central States Assembly that was canceled? It was scheduled for early June.
Right, right. In St. Louis, we
In
were
St.
so
Louis.
excited to come. I mean, we were, um, just technically, we didn't cancel it because we postponed it since we're supposed to have a yearly, I'm sure you all, keep up on the constitutions of your congregation. Plus, I've got a whole Synod constitution and the ELCA constitution. So anyway, so we had to be careful about. So the focus of our assembly was going to be, we are the church, God's vitality among us. And we were going to begin, and we'll do this virtually through the summer, celebrating. It has been the 50th anniversary since the ordination of women, the 40th anniversary since the first woman of color was ordained, and 10 years since this church voted, 2019, 10 years since this church voted to fully include gay and lesbian pastors and committed relationships on the roster. And so, again, this points to the diversity of the church. And so we were going to lift up that. And we had a speaker who was coming to talk to us about who is the church in this century? How do we understand being relevant, as well as, our tradition of what it means to be the church. And then we were going to have people go out and experience St. Louis and actually have excursions, or to experience the ministry that happens in this place, and again lifting up the diversity. We were actually pretty fortunate in that we didn't have much business that we needed to conduct. You didn't have a bishop's election. That would have been pretty hard to do a bishop's election. We only have 3 open Synod council positions, and 2 positions the incumbents are willing to go forward. We would have approved a budget. The Synod has a budget of about $1.7 million. And we always, which is down, we keep tightening that budget each year. So we would have approved a budget, and we would have approved compensation guidelines. Every year we review those to look at fair compensation for rostered folks. And so what will happen is the Synod Council will actually meet by Zoom that weekend. And for those of you that are in the Robert's Rules of Orders, there will be a motion to postpone the assembly because we don't have a quorum. And once that happens in the Synod Assembly, just like your council would do, think about it like a congregation. And so then the Synod Council will act to make those decisions. And there were a couple of resolutions, one about companion synod, one about celebrating women in ministry. So those were on the agenda, but we really wanted it to be a time to connect with one another, to be inspired by one another, to be immersed in St. Louis, because we hadn't been to St. Louis, I think, in 12 years. So that was going to be the focus of our assembly. So
Okay, that really helps thank you. That really helps give an overview of really what the focus was going to be. And
right.
Hopefully we can get this assembly.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking. And so we're actually, what we will do is not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, there will be a special email blast that goes out to all the Synod that will be kind of like a Synod Assembly, that will summarize the things that the Synod Assembly would be. My report, the treasurer's report, the vice president, some of those different ministries. So you can sit at your screens and listen to us and read our stuff. Not quite the same as being there in person, but
right. But the information will be there though,
yes,
and
yes, because in the midst of this, but the business of the church needs to continue. I mean, we have focused a lot on being responsive, which is great, and adapting to this. But just like you're in the call process, you need to continue to move forward. And so that's the same thing with the Synod, with churchwide. we need to continue to move forward and do the business. So as we come out of this, I mean, we won't have just neglected the things. And we're making decisions that hopefully will put us in a good position to continue to address the changes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay,
Mhm.
another question that came through the chat. In your previous role, you have been in a majority of our Central States churches.
Mhm.
How did this experience impact you as a pastor and as a Christian?
I tell you, I love it. And I am not, okay, you all are witnesses to this. If in the future you hear me whining about how much driving I'm going to do, remind me of the time when I couldn't drive any place, okay? So, um, but I love being out in our congregations and proclaiming the gospel. I remember when I was first invited to be on the bishop's staff. So I have been ordained how many years? I was ordained 30 years. I was ordained in 1983. So that's 36 going on 40 years, right? However, 37 years. Okay. And when Bishop Gustafson, he was the prior bishop, invited me. I was in Colorado serving a congregation there in Loveland, Colorado, and he invited me after he got elected to consider coming back to be on his staff. One of the first things I asked him was, am I going to have the opportunity to preach, to be in congregations and preach? Because I love preaching. And he said, well, there should be some of that. Well, once I got started, pretty much just about every Sunday, I was in a different congregation. And there's a lot of diversity. I mean, just ELCA, you don't all do worship the same way. I just want to tell you all that. So I've learned to be very flexible. You think coming into this, oh, I've been a pastor for all these years, piece of cake. Is like, oh, didn't know we did that. Oh, okay. Just let me know that. Or I love it when I'm helping lead worship and they're looking at me and I'm looking at them and they're like, am I supposed to be doing something here? And they go, yes, you're supposed to be doing, okay, tell me what I'm supposed to be doing next. But for me, again, going back to what I said theologically about why I think being part of a larger church, I have grown in my understanding. I mean, we all kind of get, okay, this is how I think it should be, right? I know stuff, I've been around. And then I go listen to this other group and it's like, oh, well, I hadn't thought of it that way. And including people that have a different understanding than I do, to say, okay, I believe strongly this, but talk to me about why you believe the way you do. And then to go, well, okay, so then how do we continue to work together? So I feel extremely blessed. Um, and it feels like this is where the Spirit has led me. The Spirit has led me all these years as a parish pastor, and I love being a pastor. All these years as a parish pastor, and then to be on Synod staff, to be in all the congregations. And the last few years of my Synod staff position, I was also what they called a director for evangelical mission, which means I was connected with the church-wide office, church-wide organization more. So I did that. And then to be elected bishop, it feels like all those things came together to bring me to this place. So I think it's really helped me to be the Christian and the leader I am. And it's happened because people have been willing to talk and share with me. And it's incredible what you learn when you listen, which I know I'm talking a lot, but I also can listen too.
But it's great, and I do think you're right. All those different experiences combined together have to have strengthened your faith and the ability to lead the Senate. So um, it's great to hear those from your perspective. My family's had the fortunate experience of living around the country, and so we were in Philadelphia in a Lutheran church, in Louisville in a Lutheran church, and seeing even how you were right, the different congregations among the ELCA can be so very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I've gotten to take a piece of all those different congregations and build my faith based on those who might not think exactly how I do or would do things how I would.
Mm-hmm.
And very fortunate in that. But it
Mm-hmm.
does give you a greater perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We are switching gears. We had another question come through. How are other congregations adapting the call process when in-person interviews and visit opportunities are limited?
So they are doing Zoom. I mean, they are, we have some congregations that are doing, they're going to have small group kind of Zoom interactions so that members of the congregation can meet the candidate. Um, and we do have a couple congregations that are at the point, we're working with them. And it depends upon, you have to be careful about state, and our states allow this and constitutions and whatever. They're actually going to have an electronic Zoom congregational meeting. So, part of this was not knowing how long this would, and people are at different places. But we put it on kind of on hold for a little bit as we were waiting to see what would happen. But as this continues, it's happening virtually. And this has happened. This isn't a congregational, but St. Louis Campus Ministry, the call comes through the Synod Council, but there's a new campus pastor who will be coming to St. Louis. And they did have the opportunity to do in person prior to things being shut down, but we went ahead and finished out the process using technology. We've had a few pastors who have accepted and actually moved to new calls. One of our pastors accepted a new call and started at a time when they couldn't be together in worship. So, but that's what they're doing. We're moving forward. So.
Okay. Getting creative for sure, and using
Yes.
the technology we do have
We are
available.
using the technology, and we're working with the church-wide office, the office of the secretary there, to make sure that we are still doing things in proper order, so that we're not throwing out the Constitution, but how can we do this in proper order? And as long as you have a way for people to ask questions, and then we're figuring out the voting, because it's then you actually can conduct business this way. So.
Right, right. Have you seen any in-person happen yet, or know of anything yet?
Um, There are some of our smaller congregations have begun in-person worship. Now they're small, and actually it's a little bit easier for them. Um, I will have to say this is what I was nervous about, and it is happening. There's a lot, and I hope that there doesn't become this divisiveness of, well, you shouldn't open. Well, yes, you should open. And I mean, we're all in different places, and we need to make the right decisions for us, because what works for you won't necessarily work for another congregation. So yeah, but that is a challenge. Some of our smaller congregations have started to open. Some are saying if they have the capacity to do it outside, they're starting to do some outside gatherings. Some are saying, let's just take it slow through June and look at toward the end of June. So to be honest, we are all over the place. We're all over the place. And what I've tried to do in my office is to give people the guidelines, and the church-wide did give a lot of things to consider, if you the CDC, those kinds of things, and just ask each congregation, which you did with your pat, is to think through a plan, just kind of think through things about how we can do this, because we have to balance. We can't simply stay, and I'm trying to say this carefully. I do understand that we need to reopen. I mean, we can't simply say we cannot stay shut down for months and months and months. I mean, our economy, we need that interaction with people in person. So we can't just say we're just going to completely stay shut down until we get a vaccine. I mean, but we also can't simply open the doors and say just, flood back here like it's never happened, because it's not just you that are risking your health. So it's not just the members of congregations but they live in neighborhoods and they go to grocery stores and they whatever. So how do we care for our neighbors? So we need to, in the midst of that, say, how can we slowly, carefully, faithfully begin to have in-person gatherings? And, some of our congregations have said, we're going to continue to do online worship, but we're going to gather for small group prayer groups or small group Bible studies or small group, something. So we start having that interaction. But it's tough. I have to tell you, it's tough. And especially with not everybody agrees, right? I mean, I don't know even the infectious disease doctors don't all agree, right?
Right.
I mean, so wear a mask, don't wear a mask. You know, Sanitize things. Well, does a virus really live on stuff? It's like, oh my goodness. I mean, sing, don't sing. I mean, communion, I mean, all of that. And then it makes it tough when different denominations, are, churches down the road. Like I was talking to one of our pastors, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod down the road. Well, they're open. And so then their members are saying, well, why can't we? And then unfortunately, it's become politicized. I mean, and I don't mean to totally step into all of that, but this is about, we're all doing the best we can. I truly believe that. And we're trying to make the best decisions. And we need to be gentle and understanding with that. And again, I mean, the church that I'm a part of, Atonement in Overland Park, like their service this morning, live stream. They're a larger church. And the pastor simply said, we have not developed our plan yet for resuming in-person worship. It's going to be more complicated for them to do 6 feet apart in do you make reservations? I mean, that's what some churches are talking about. If you're, this to this, you all can come this Sunday because we can only have so many people. And I mean, all of those things are hard to figure out. So, yeah.
Yeah, they are. And we have definitely been going through that process and thoughtful input from so many on our steering committee talking through this and making sure, like, because the feedback we also received was across the board. We're ready to come back now, or we don't
Yep.
want to see you again in person until September. So you've got
Mm-hmm.
that broad
Yes.
feedback. And so, how can we do this safely, slowly, and in keeping with the CDC guidelines and um, all the other, inputs we've gotten? So it is a challenge. It is.
Oh, yes. I really, that's probably the thing that weighs on me the most these days is,
Right.
is how can, supporting our congregations in these times and our leaders. And again, recognizing that it's hard because some of our congregations are in counties, they haven't had a single case. But if they get one case and it spreads in these rural, I mean, it will overwhelm their health care. I mean, they don't have, so that's the fear. So where do what is the right decision to do? Um, so yeah. I
Yep.
mean,
And
we're still working from home. The Senate staff is, probably looking at sometime in June returning to offices. And we're just starting the conversation about our fall theological conference. I mean, and that's in October, but I mean, things are going to look different for the next months. I mean,
and it's got to be everybody kind of polices themselves too. Am
yes.
I vulnerable? Am I not feeling good? I need to stay in and making sure that they're thinking through that before they do participate in a worship. We did just announce in our eSend times that we will be doing worship the weekend of June 6th and 7th.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to, we have 6-foot places marked out, and
Mm-hmm.
we have thought through how the worship will go, and communion and the wafers and the wine and individual cups. That way no one's touching anyone's cup or anyone's wafers. So we're thinking through all of those steps, and
Right.
we've it, and doing a worship on Saturday night and one worship on Sunday, so we have time in between worship services,
Mm-hmm.
clean and disinfect. And so we've worked through some plans, and we're going to give it a try, knowing there'll probably be things we have to
Yep.
adjust. And
Yep.
we just know we need to be fluid and flexible through
And
this.
that's it. And that's it. And the other thing that, everything we hear is that are we flexible enough that if there's a peak, might we need to, go back to, an earlier stage, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Correct. And we're going to keep our online services
Mm-hmm.
going. Just keep
Right.
that will always be an option. That way, no
Right.
one feels like the only way they can worship is coming back into the building.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So, okay, one more question came through. How are we, and in parentheses, church-wide, supporting, connecting, engaging youth through this pandemic?
That is a good question. To be honest with you, I don't know. Um, at this point, the National Youth Gathering is still slated for not this summer, but next summer. So plans are still moving forward with that. Now, this isn't specifically with youth, but a huge program, YAGM, Young Adults in Global Mission, has been canceled this next year. Um, and many of our camps have are not operating, including Camp Tomashinga, which is in our Senate, are not going to be having campers. So that's a good question. It is really tough, especially a time when youth are, looking forward to those things and, all of that. So.
Just in the same boat. Vacation Bible School's been canceled. A lot of our youth go to Leadership Lab
Mm-hmm.
over in Illinois, and that's been canceled. They're looking though at alternatives to doing something online that week to
Mm-hmm.
keep the youth engaged. And I know for us, we're continuing to do a children's learning hour
Right.
and story time. So I know there's lots of creativity I'm sure that people are doing, especially over the summer, knowing that the camp part of things
Mm-hmm.
won't be happening. Yeah, but it's
Mm-hmm.
tough. And
It
especially
is.
kids who've been doing digital school, it's hard to
Oh,
convince them to jump on and do something else digital.
right, exactly. And that may be, are there some things, again, for us to be creative that you may not be able to do that, but could you do some small group kind of outdoor activities just to get, again, we need to start slowly adjusting to this new kind of way of being. And we do need the in-person interaction. I mean, so how do we begin to do that slowly, carefully, but we need to start doing some of that. Yeah.
I agree completely. We do. We just do. And the kids need some of that too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we all do.
Oh,
We
yes.
I don't have any other questions that have come through the chat room. Um, any other remarks that you have, Bishop Candea, for us
No, this
as
has
maybe we
been delightful. I mean, I am looking forward to the time to be with you in person, and maybe when your new pastor comes, wouldn't that be fun? So,
that
um,
would be
be-
amazing.
because I've discovered in this, I love doing ordinations. That's a perk that I get to do as a bishop. Um, and second to that is installations of new pastors. Every once in a while, it's like, well, I just want to come do that because I want to be there. So, So I am looking forward to being able to do that. I was kind of bummed. I was gonna be able to go. There's a new bishop, Episcopal bishop in St. Louis, who is being consecrated. He was supposed to be in April, and now it's in June. But it has to just be very, the small. And I'm gonna so. But he did tell me if things, if they're missing a Lutheran bishop, I could drive over to St. Louis. I said I'll be there, even if to be one of the 10. So,
Yeah, great. Well, we want to say thank you, first of all, for the wonderful message
oh,
today that you gave to us. And I'm not going to ruin it for those who haven't had a chance to listen and view the service. But thank you. It was wonderful, especially again during this pandemic. If we can all shine together uh,
mhm.
with the glory of God through this together as one. So thank you for that wonderful
You're
message. And
welcome.
then thank you for spending the almost hour with
Well,
us
thank you.
today.
This was delightful. This helps my Sunday morning to feel more like a Sunday morning. So,
Yay. Good.
yeah.
Good.
Well,
We're
thank
happy.
you. God's
You
blessings on all of you, and I'm so excited to hear as you continue through this journey. And excited for you and so appreciative. I just want to say I'm so appreciative to your pastoral leaders, um, that they have been phenomenal, and I know that they have led you well, and we really do see them. We're in this together, and that they are a wonderful extension of this office. So thank you, pastors. I appreciate that very much. So have a blessed rest of your day and enjoy. Thank you.
Yes,
Bye
you
bye.
too. Thank you.